So today we have got the lovely Debra Blackman with us, and I'm delighted to invite her to share today in looking at why it's important to lead from the heart. There's been so many times, so many years where we've been told, I think particularly as women actually, that we should be more objective and not subjective. But the time of that is gone. It's time to stop. It's time to stop thinking that our head is in control and allowing our heart to lead us. So first of all, Debra, I'm really pleased to have you with me to talk about this today.
Oh, it's lovely to be here, Angela. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, before we start and the listeners get to, well, I would like the listeners to get to know you a little bit. So could you just tell us where you are in the world? What is it that you do for your business? Just a little bit of information so we can understand who you are.
Yes, lovely. Well, first of all, I must say I'm in Preston and my little dog, I'm working from home, which is wonderful these days. We can do that. So if you hear a little woof, she's decided that there's birds in the garden and they are her arch enemy. So you might hear some woofing. So I do apologize in advance. Yeah. So I've had a very challenging childhood. It's not defining me anymore. It used to. And I'm sure other people have endured worse, but my parents had suffered from mental illness. I discovered at a later age. And unfortunately, they didn't make the wise choices with parenthood that perhaps they could have done. So I was left with a traumatic experience growing up, and then that led into adolescence and then into my adulthood. And the vast majority of my life I've spent in self-loathing and being terribly unhappy and putting a brave face on the world, because that's what I was told we had to do, and keeping others' secrets, whereas in fact, actually, there was no reason to be fair, but it was a lot of secrecy involved around in my life. So I set up a number of personas, which were to help me cope with various situations. And as the years went on, I forgot really who intrinsically I was, because I got so many ways of coping, then so many different ways of putting myself across to people, that I felt very isolated, didn't feel that I was included, didn't feel that I was worthy of love, certainly didn't feel loved, and therefore, weirdly enough, pushed people away in the large projection of my life. So I wanted something, but I kept on pushing it away, not realizing that was my defense mechanism of how to perhaps protect myself. So I had a lot of limiting beliefs and a lot of coping mechanisms that didn't really serve me very well. And weirdly enough, I had a very high profile job. I had a successful career, which a lot of people in my circumstance have, because we drive ourselves to almost the point of collapse in trying to build something that we perceive as successful, or the world that perceives us around would categorize as successful. So I've worked in corporates at a decent level, and I put myself under all sorts of pressure, but I put myself in environments which weren't conducive to the intrinsic value system that I had. And therefore, I was always at odds, always anxious. I had anxiety for the large part of my life and didn't sleep either for a very large part of my life. And people say, how can you do that? Well, you can if you don't feel that you can relax enough to sleep properly. And then it came about that at the age of 57, I had what I term as a nervous breakdown. And it was the best thing that happened to me, because it forced me to look at my life. It forced me to look at where I'd come and how then to take on the challenges and the delights of the next phase of my life. So that was a defining moment. I then took counseling, which was the first time I felt that I was equipped to do so, because I literally didn't have anything to lose at that point. And it's often at these low ebbs, those crisis moments, where there's a paradigm shift. It's the catalyst to be able to think, right, well, now is the chance that I can rebuild and have a fundamentally different view of what I want to do. And for the first time in my life, I let the feelings in and I let the feelings out through my heart that now I know what that feels like, and the joy that that brings, and the peace and the serenity and all of the positives. And I'm not woohoo in the sense that you have to be positive in every situation. But even now, when looking at things that are not right, I look at them as learning opportunities as opposed to in a victim mode. And that's a totally, totally different way of looking at things. So right now, I'm in a situation in my life where I'm on this journey. I feel now that I am centered. I am gaining far more perspective as to who I am. And I'm not ashamed to say that I'm a wonderful human being living in a world of challenge, but willing to take up the opportunity to grow. Compassion now, understanding that we're all on a journey and we're all on various degrees of self-awareness. So my compassion for others has exponentially grown as I've been on this journey, because I used to be incredibly judgmental and hold fast opinions, etc., that were very self-serving. And that wasn't wrong. I've learned to have compassion for myself as well. But now I understand that we're all in this wonderful melting pot together. And now that I have the value of building a team around me from a business perspective, but also from my personal life as well, I find that I'm much more inclusive, and I feel much more included, and I feel that I'm supported by others, because I've been able to let go of that self-fulfilling prophecy that I'm the only ever one that can do anything. And actually, I'm trusting others more, and I'm allowing life to take on its ebbs and flows without always having to think that I need to control it. And that was a bit like the old phrase King Canute trying to tell the tide to go back. It was inevitable that I would have an issue with that, because it's not going to happen. I can't control everything. And now neither do I want to, because being in the unknown is rather like being childlike again, and having that imagination and that creativity, so that basically now the world is full of fun, it's full of newness, it's full of ideation and creation opportunities. And that's just turned my life and my enjoyment of my world around. So I don't know if that hopefully has explained a little bit about my backstory as to see where I am now and how I'm developing.
It has. So thank you for that. And I want to sort of come back to some of the things you said. And one of them that struck me, because I think it's going to be true for many of the listeners. You mentioned having gone through a stage where you were super critical of other people. And, I wanted to ask you really, on reflection, do you feel like that again was a self-preservation sort of technique? Because actually the person you were most critical of was yourself. You didn't like yourself, you were confused about yourself, and therefore you put up this kind of barrier of, criticizing other people.
Yes, I think you've said something that's very wise and insightful there, because now I believe that people and circumstances will come into your life to show you where you are not free. That's a quote from Peter Crone, who is called the mind architect. I listen to a lot of podcasts about self-development, etc. And he's a very wise person, having lost his parents at a young age as well. And one of the things that I realize now is that when I'm triggered, and don't get me wrong, I'm still triggered by things, but I'm taking more of an analytical approach rather than reacting straight away, which has been incredibly helpful, is that when people come into my life or circumstances happen, and I think, this has made me feel agitated, this is making me feel afraid, this is making me feel anxious or critical, it's often highlighting something in myself that I don't want to acknowledge, and that I see it in somebody else, and it's creating a trigger in me because I know I'm not healed and I'm not right in that particular area. So rather than thinking, and I also believe that our thoughts very much become the actions that we take, and therefore what is manifested in our life is a result of the emotion and the action and then the realization and the formation of what happens. Because I do believe, in the sense that what we have in front of us in our perceived reality is something which is within ourselves, as something that we can work on. So yeah, I think that anybody that I'm coming across now that triggers me in some way, I'm actually being thankful and thinking, what can I learn about myself as to why I had the trigger? And one thing that I do, which is really useful for me, and I can only speak from my own perspective, but I think when I said to my counselor, I'm mad, I'm this, I'm that, and she said, no, you're very normal. Knowing what you've been through, you're particularly classic in the way that you're handling things and how life has unfolded for you. So that gave me a sense of grounding to know that actually, you know what, I'm not out there, I'm nothing special. I'm actually following a classic route. And so this is just as classic as everything else in this learning curve, is to sit with the uncomfortable feeling, acknowledge it for what it is, because what I've learned over the years is when I try and bypass the feeling, it comes back to bite me. And it comes back to bite me in a bigger way than it did when it was first sort of like a little feeling. So now I lean into it and I thank it. I thank it for the experience. And I say to it, and I literally talk to it, whether it be out loud, if circumstances would allow, or mentally. And I ask it, what are you trying to teach me? And I sit with it. And rather than making a snap judgment, sometimes that can take an instant to understand. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer. Sometimes it can become in a day. But then when I say, what am I trying to learn from this? Please give me a sign where I can identify that learning. And so sometimes I can be listening to a podcast and all of a sudden the information that's coming out is directly relevant for the feeling that I've had. Or again, I can speak with somebody and also they say something and I go, oh, yes. And it comes back to me. So now I'm very mindful of the fact that when I am triggered by a person or a circumstance, or a feeling comes up from nowhere, this is something that I now attribute to my subconscious. And it's coming into my conscious reality. And I think, right, what is this trying to teach me? Rather than firing off on all cylinders and afterwards thinking, maybe I could have done that a bit better.
I think you know, again, you're touching on something that I think many people will let slip them by. And I remember reading a book a long time ago. It's about the power. I can't remember what it was called actually, but it was something to do with the power of pain or the purpose of pain, I think it was. And he was referring to the fact that in our bodies, the physical pain is always going to be telling us something is wrong and that we shouldn't just ignore it. We shouldn't just push on. And, you know, you hear about people injuring themselves, you know, maybe with their back because they ignore the pain.
Yeah.
But for me, also that discovery that it's not just physical pain that we need to do that with, it's also with emotional pain. So our feelings, if we are feeling hurt or embarrassed or shy or whatever it is that we're feeling, there's something underneath that we need to deal with, that we need to look at. And that's exactly what you're highlighting here. It's that point of don't just squash those feelings down. Don't feel a failure. Don't feel cross with yourself. Don't feel annoyed or irritated and try and sort of squash those feelings down. Because if you do, there's going to be a deeper problem that's going to come out and arise. And it's where conflicts happen. If we look at our world today, well, not just today, but down through the centuries, there's been all sorts of conflict out there. And generally speaking, it's because there's no communication. There's no people kind of looking, taking a step back. They've allowed it to get to the point where there's like a clash of it. And so for yourself, you know, you've just shared something about that. How would you help somebody else who maybe talked to you and was really struggling and you could see that they're really struggling with things underneath? How would you perhaps help them to unlock that?
Right. Well, I think that I never give advice unless I'm asked for it, because one of the things which I used to do, which was a weakness, is because of my upbringing, I tried to people please and I tried to fix other people's problems. And that's none of my business in that sense. But if somebody were to ask me, how could I do something differently, or I'm not very happy in my life at the moment. I think that what happened to me is one of the things which I've started to practice. One could call it mindfulness, because I started off really small. Now I meditate, but it's becoming aware of who we are and why we're being triggered or why we feel deeply unhappy. And to give oneself, and you mentioned this earlier, to give ourselves the compassion to know that we are exactly at the right time, at the moment, and everything is perfect for us then to take the next step. However awful we perceive our situation, it is there because it is the perfect place, it's the perfect timing for this to happen. Now, I don't wish bad things on anybody, and I've gone through and probably will go through things that I perceive to be not positive, i.e. bad, but it is because it is the perfect timing and the perfect set of circumstances to be present right now in your life. So whatever has got you to this point, be grateful, because this then in this present moment is the chance to be able to take the steps to change. And never be hopeless. I was going to commit suicide. When I had the breakdown, I couldn't see a point of carrying on. I decided that my life was worthless, I was meaningless, and that if I disappeared tomorrow, nobody would care. So what's the point of me being around? And my higher power, the part of me that is connected to more than just me, took it upon itself to make me go through and look on the internet counselors near me. And then certain circumstances and events happened which unfolded without me even thinking about it, to be able to save me from doing what I was going to do and then take this journey. Now, that time was the perfect time for me to be able to change. It took me to that level to be able to change. So what I'd say to anybody is, if you're going through a really tough time, be compassionate to yourself. If necessary, speak to somebody that you can trust. That's very important. But also listen to yourself and give yourself the love that you deserve. Because if we think about this, which is something that really, really blew my mind, I'm not too good with the statistics, but it's something like 3 trillion to 1 that we become a human being in the first place. I don't know if that's it, but it's like one of these massive numbers. So there's a reason why we're here. Each and every individual, this is not happening by chance. So if we think of how we've literally won the lottery of actually having an experience of life, this shows to us, what it showed to me, that we're here for a reason. And it doesn't matter where we are in our journey. We could be in our 80s and suddenly find the discovery of self-awareness and moving forward. Me was 57. You could be 12, you could be 20. That is not the point. The point is that it could be the blessing to be able to move on from. And when we step into that abyss, when we're in that situation, and where I was, where I felt there was no hope, there was nothing there, sometimes that's when we can have our greatest, I call mine a metamorphosis, where I've literally changed from the inside, but you could call it transformation. You know, I went in a chrysalis, a little bug, a little caterpillar, and I came out a butterfly. And I'm still now airing my wings in the open to get them hardened so that I can fly, because I've not quite taken off yet. I feel that there's a whole lot more that I can do to take off. But if you're willing to say, right, this could be the best thing. There's a Tolstoy novel called The Tale of Two Cities, and it starts with, this is the best of times, this was the worst of times, or it might be the worst of times and the best of times. But in that polarity, in that way in which we've got like a sliding doors moment, there was a movie called Sliding Doors, we can say yes to life and yes to moving forward. And in that way, I was guided to say yes, and I've been guided to say yes since that moment. And so if anybody's struggling, if you can speak to somebody that you trust, brilliant. But what I would say is it could be your absolutely most brilliant moment to have a wonderful change where all of a sudden you start to see that there is real meaning and purpose and happiness and joy and fulfillment and all those wonderful positive things and love that can come into your life from that particular moment onwards.
Yes. Yeah, you touched on lots of deep issues there. And one of the things that comes to mind as you're talking about it is when we're looking at the head and the heart, and it occurs to me that so often we accidentally, or maybe through training or how we've been taught, we start listening to our head, and our head will tell us that maybe we failed, maybe the business didn't work, maybe the relationship's fallen apart, maybe we're overweight. Our head will always look at the outside. It will always see the outside. Our hearts are completely different. They're created first. It's the first part of our body to actually work. And it's all about the inner self. It's all about the essence of who we are. Creation, that moment of the conception, that when the baby is first conceived, you are right. It's completely miraculous. It doesn't happen by chance. It happens by that moment. It is a creation, and there's no two people alike. And when I was little, I remember thinking to myself, I used to lie awake thinking, why am I me? Why am I not somebody else? Why am I in this body, and why have I been born into this family? And it was only literally as years went by, I began to realize that was because that was the best place for me to be. That was the place I was going to become and learn to become the person I should have been. It wasn't that everything was rosy in the garden. It wasn't that I didn't have problems. I went through an awful time of bullying at school. But all of those things have led me to where I am today, to doing what I do today. And listening to you talking there, it feels as if in that moment of your life, at that age of 57, suddenly you had the ability to start listening to your heart and not your head. And your head had been telling you all this stuff, and it had been taking on board negative things from the past. But suddenly you gave your heart the chance to lead you into the true reality of who you are. Now you're able to hear that. You're able to allow yourself to be led, to be moving forward, to be out there touching other people, not just yourself anymore, because there's a reason behind it. There's an excitement and an energy, and I can sense it just talking to you. I mean, the idea of becoming that butterfly, and maybe not yet even seeing that the ultimate, goal of that. But that's the truth, isn't it? And the more people I talk to, often we are talking to people who are probably over the age of 50, and life has been life up until that age. There's children or relationships, there's work, and there's all this stuff that your life is filled with. And suddenly there comes to this space in life where you get a chance to look and see who you really are and explore that and go deeper. And I would love anybody listening to this particular podcast to ask yourself, who are you? What is it that makes you up? What's going on inside of you? What are you excited about? What parts of you are you not happy about? Are you willing to let go of them? Because, what you're saying, and one of the biggest step forward for me was to say, I'm not going to let the past control me anymore. It has no right. It has no right whatsoever to control me, but it was holding me. Like, those bungee rope things that people tie on roof boxes and things like that with. It felt like there were these attachments, and could go forward, but only so far before something would pull me back again. And I knew that I had to unhook myself from there. And a lot for me was to do with forgiveness of things that had happened in the past. And it's like saying, even if somebody had hurt me, I've got no idea why. I don't know what was going on in their life. Those girls that were so horrible to me, I have no idea why they were doing that. Probably something horrible in their life was going on. I'm never going to meet them again. They're not going to come and say sorry to me, but that doesn't mean to say I can't forgive them. And that act of forgiveness meant that one hook was gone, and then another one gone. And that lightness that you're talking of, that allows you then to step up, into who you should be. It's life-changing, isn't it?
Yes, it is life-changing. And you mentioned something that's really powerful, is the power of forgiveness. But not just for other people, for ourselves, to forgive ourselves, because we did the best we could within the tools and the circumstances that we had at the time and the knowledge that we had at the time. So the people that we've hurt, forgive ourselves for the sense that we didn't know any better at that point, and we came from a place that we came from. And would we do it again knowing what we know now? Well, hopefully not. So to forgive ourselves is incredibly important, but to learn from what we did and understand that actually there is another way of doing something that can be far more beneficial for all. And the other thing is as well, if we think about, if we can erase all the memories. So memory is the past. So if we can look at this as having no past, no future, because past is regret and unhappiness and, I suppose, yeah, basically regret. And then the future is anxiety and fear, because we don't know what's in the unknown. So I know I can project enormously overblown, anxious thoughts on what will happen that might never happen. And oftentimes doesn't happen. So I've wasted all of that energy on something that was never going to happen in the first place. But all we have in life is the present moment. And Eckhart Tolle is an amazing guy. He's on YouTube, and he wrote a book, The Power of Now. And it's all about, and this is quite spiritual in a way, and this is how people like Buddhists think, well, you don't have to be spiritual to understand that if we focus on the present moment as it unfolds, the past we can never get back, the future never comes, so all we have is the present moment. And if we can live in that present moment with the love, and this is the thing, my business is centered on love, my life is centered on love. And I say there's many forms of love: romantic love, friendship love, business love, love for ourselves. The word love isn't a pink and fluffy thing, it's a very deep and powerful word. It's it's just a four-letter word that is just so deep with power. And if we come from a center of love and we open our heart, I didn't know what it was like to open my heart. When I did, the heart is a muscle. And the more one works the heart from a love perspective, not just from being fit and healthy, because it gains its own muscle there. But if we can think about our heart as a transmitter and a receiver, it is all around energy. This is scientifically proven that we are all energy. Everything in this world is energy. And you get energy that vibrates on certain frequencies. You get lower and higher frequencies. And the higher we get, that's associated with lovely emotions, really the good things in life. And the lower emotions and the sad emotions and the anxious moments resonate on a lower frequency. And this is all proven by physics and things like that. So if in our heart we can think about a tap, that's how I recognize it. Whenever I'm anxious, I know I've not got my heart open. And if we think about a tap that we open and we see the water pouring out, and the more we turn the tap on, the more the water pools down. I think of it like that, so that I can turn the tap on of my heart and let that energy, let that water, let that love come out. And oddly enough, I used to be frightened like you wouldn't believe to do this, because I thought, well, what are people going to come back? What happens if it's rejected or what have you? But you know what? That in a sense doesn't matter, because if you think about just filling a lovely big swimming pool or a lake with that love and just give it out there, what happens is our heart gets bigger to be able to receive it back. And that's what I've realized with the heart, is that it's an amazing electromagnetic thing anyway, the more you delve into it. And it can put an energy force 3 meters wide around us so that we are protected by this energy field. But coming back to what people will understand about the heart, when you're in those moments where you see a wonderful sunset or a beautiful dawn, often within nature, you see the most wonderful things that, like, oh, wow, or babies smile, or looking into your children's eyes, or I have a lovely little dog and I look into her eyes and I just fill with this wonderful love. That is so important because we're putting that energy out there, and it attracts people that are on that energy level. And so I've met you, I've met the most wonderful people, whereas before, and I'm not thinking badly, I don't judge them, but the people that were in my life, the most wonderful thing we liked to do together was complain together and say how awful people were, or how awful life was, or how tough things were, or how much our boss hated us. But the wonderful thing is now I don't have those conversations because I don't actually think like that anymore. And that's a huge, massive paradigm shift from where I was. And I'm not thinking about toxic positivity. I'm talking about genuine love and looking at things where I think, being very mindful. Oh, hang on a minute. I just kind of, with that conversation with that person, got a little bit like, I call it the BITCH fest. I won't say the full word, but you get into that state of, no, I've got a tougher thing. No, I'm tougher than that. Oh, and mine's more challenging. Oh, and you think, hang on a minute, I've just gone down that rabbit hole of negativity. Well, if the other way were true, and then what happens is, what I'm finding is the synchronicity in life starts to come around where you think, I know it's daft, but I got all the green lights the other day driving out of Preston. They just went green, 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 green. I'm like, yay! I've done it in half the time and I was so grateful. And it set me up for a really good drive to Manchester where I needed to be. And just little things like that, you just go, wow, that was so cool. This is great. And it makes you realize, well, it makes me realize that actually life is there to have fun, enjoyment, along with the challenges. What can that teach me? But life is just such a lovely journey as well.
Yes, it is. And again, if you allow it to be, we can live in those sort of gloomy places, looking out negatively at what's going on around us, or we can choose to open ourselves. And a couple of things you said there. I was interested by the when you quoted about the past is history. It was just because we used to have a poster on our wall as the children were growing up, and it said, "The past is history, the future is a mystery, and today is a gift," which is why it's called the present. And it was the way that I wanted the children to see life and to realize that if we don't take the most of today, we'll never get it back again. That's it, it's gone. And all that we'll be left with is a bad memory, and that's not what we want. So I love that. And I think it's a very useful thing just to remind ourselves when things are tough today, let's have a look at why are they tough. But the most important for me, and it's coming very clearly through what you're saying, is that as we start allowing our heart to control, and as we start listening with our heart instead of our head, then we will always be able to see the positive. We'll be able to see the positive of ourselves. We'll be able to love ourselves in a different way. And we'll be able to love other people in a different way. Because if our heart listens to why somebody is saying something bad, and I remember being at work in my 20s, I was working in an unemployment benefit office at the time. And the coffee room is exactly what you've just described. It was like, oh, I hate that person. That he's, this terrible, and this job's worse, and I don't get enough money. Nothing positive at all. And if I listened with my head, it just sent me down this kind of like, why are you even in this job, for goodness sake, And it was a very difficult place to be more positive. But if I started listening with my heart, it showed me how unhappy these people were, and that there was something going on in their lives that they were out of control of. They didn't know how to change. There was a lack of confidence, maybe. They were doing this job because they didn't think they would ever be able to do another job. Whatever it was that was going on in their lives, it was pressing them down. But when we start listening to each other with our heart and we become open to the pain that's perhaps behind what they're saying, life takes on a whole different purpose and a different meaning. And because you're listening like that, which is a huge gift to listen to anybody, it's a huge gift to give them, because you're listening, they can start reflecting and feel worth something. They can feel like, well, gosh, she actually cares. She's asking me because she cares, not because she wants to throw another complaint at me, which is like you said before. It's like, well, my problem's much bigger than yours. Yes, but no, you don't even know what it's half like. But actually, if you start listening, and that's when I look at the world, and that's really what this podcast is all about. It's time for people, for the leaders in this world, to start listening with their hearts instead of their heads all the time, instead of trying to control things by all the data that's going on in here, and start thinking, how am I impacting this world? How am I affecting the people that live in it? What am I doing for good? How am I changing things? And it's such a different perspective, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And that's why I say for me it was a metamorphosis. Because the other thing that I have now found is my purpose. And when I was in that negative state, I didn't have a purpose. Because once I think one gets a purpose, things make sense. And then the challenges that come across asking how I can develop and grow and learn is also that I can deliver and give my purpose more. So for me, I'm a voice. I'm a bit like you, I suppose, in the sense that I want to spread the word that there is another way, that we can live our lives, and that there is meaning and purpose to what we do. And I don't think purpose necessarily has to be defined in like a sentence. But what I do realize is that the way I come across, the way I am myself, influences other people in ways that I have no idea how powerful I'm influencing them. So, for instance, I had no idea when I was in a negative state how my influence was affecting people. But now I know from the positive perspective. I went to a networking event not so long ago, and I hadn't been for a while because I've just been so busy. And I've always felt that I've always been an outsider looking in, and that I was never part of a group. I never felt completely included in something. And in fact, actually, I preferred to be on the edge, if I'm absolutely honest. And I walked into this face-to-face networking group, and literally, as I was walking in the room, 3 people went, "Oh, hi, Deborah, how are you? Gosh, we've missed you. Where have you been?" And you know what? I thought, this is really different, because I've spent my life not wanting to be seen, not wanting to be heard, not wanting to be acknowledged, blending into the background because of all the trauma that I've experienced in my life. I didn't want to be seen, heard, or acknowledged because it meant that then I was under the radar. And hopefully then the abuse that I suffered wouldn't happen. Because if I was unseen, unheard, and what have you, and I was invisible, I could protect myself. So I'd obviously got something in me that went out into the world in this cloak of invisibility. And people noticed me, which was great, not from an egotistical point of view, but I felt really loved. And when I walked up to them, they said, "Oh," and they put their arms around, "Oh, let's have a hug." And I'm not really a huggy person because, again, I've always been like, oh, what do? I was never shown the manifestation of love by my parents. That was something that was drilled into me, that my family didn't do that. So I was never, ever in a situation where I'd be openly hugging people. It just was not within my physical makeup. And I know it's not wrong not to hug people, but it wasn't what I was in. And they all wanted a hug. And then somebody said, "Oh, you're not talking to me then. How are you?" And you know what? I had to go back. When I finished, I had to ring up a friend, because I was so bowled over by the experience of all these people wanting to include me within this group. I felt really quite tearful.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the first time that I realized something massive had shifted in myself. Because I've been to parties, I've been to networking events where literally I'd be stood in the corner and everybody's going about their business talking to each other. And it's like I didn't exist. So the energy that I'm now putting out by loving other people, by putting that wave of warmth and feeling, and I'm okay, I'm good as well, I'm worthy of love, I'm worthy of recognition. What I am is a wonderful being. And because I was much more subconsciously projecting that, that's how people came across to me. And I
Yes.
just felt that was wonderful. So I thanked everybody because it was, I didn't say, oh my gosh, this is like amazing, but something shifted. And I've realized now that I'm being viewed by the world as somebody who matters, who they care about, who is intrinsically valued in my community. And I'd never, ever felt like that before. So it was a very, very interesting situation.
And what a wonderful description and just a sort of example, really, for anybody listening. That often it is ourselves that can push people away, and it's not necessarily because you want to. It's not because you've planned to, or because you even think you're better than anybody else. It's just, as you just said, there's an air that we can give off that says, "Don't come near me." You know, and you can come this far but no further. That can be and it can just be by things we don't say as much as by things we do say, but by opening yourself to start really experiencing who you are, loving who you are, learning who you are, developing who you are, all of those things, you've opened up a door for other people that they can come in, and it's like you're saying, come on in, let's sit down and have a cup of tea together. Let's find out about each other. And there's something very, very attractive about that. You mentioned again before talking about how the heart grows, and that's exactly what you've experienced, because as you've allowed your heart to expand, it can take more people into it, and it can reach more people, it can touch more people. And the more that we do that, the more there's a message that each of us has, which is unique. It's as unique as the creation of who we are. It's something that we can bring to this world that nobody else can. And it can be similar to, but it will never be the same as, because they've not had the same experiences. And by taking hold of what's gone before and learning from it and using it to grow, then we all have a positive message to bring to this world. And I want to thank you, first of all, Deborah, for coming along and being very open about your life and your struggles, and the things that you've gone through, because I think it's an amazing story for others to listen to, and also to bring hope. If you're listening to us today and it struck a chord, maybe there's a moment in your life when everything seemed to go black, or maybe you're there now. The message today is clearly, don't stay there. Don't think that there's nobody out there that loves you or that wants to know you, because it isn't true. It's simply a lie that our heads will tell us when we don't understand what our heart has got for us. So, reach out, connect with Deborah. We're going to share links and details that you can talk to us, and don't stay there. Listen to the heart inside of you, not the lies that your head will tell you at times. Thank you very much, Deborah, for coming along today.
Thank you, Angela. And I think you've just given such wise words. Nobody's alone. Everybody's being supportive. But you know what? Even if you are in that situation where you have nobody, which I was in that situation, there's something within us all that actually can speak to us. And if we listen, it will speak. And ultimately, there's a guiding hand in all of us that can help us to come from where we were into a different situation. So even again, if you have nobody that you feel that you can talk to, that's okay, because you do have the most wonderful spirit within you that you can ask to help you, and it will help you. I promise you, it helped me, it's helped other people that I know. So you aren't alone, even when you are physically alone, you're not alone. You have that wonderful, supporting love that will come and nurture you and give you a big hug from the inside to go that next step. So, as I said, nobody is ever alone. But if you would like somebody to help and actually talk to somebody, I'd be delighted to speak with anybody. And what I'd say is, I don't pass judgment. I listen incredibly well because I've been there. And if it can help one person, I'd like to think that that's something, there's a gift that I can give to the world.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And then, like you say, in that moment, you might feel physically alone, but no, you're not. Remembering just what a miracle it was that created you in the first place, that you weren't an accident. It wasn't by chance. There's a purpose and there's a future. And it's about finding it. So definitely look inside yourself and reach out to if you need to. So thank you again.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you.